And I believe we're live, guys. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about this little beast that I got. And yes, my credit cards are completely maxed out, but we're going to be talking about the Sony FX6. And I posted a couple of pictures in social media, Twitter, Instagram, and I believe also here in YouTube. I haven't made a video about the camera, but today we're going to be talking about this little guy right here. So I've been eyeing this camera for a while. As some of you guys know, I actually put a pre-order, decided to cancel, and went for the Canon C70. Now, disclaimer, I'm actually happy with the Canon C70. It's a camera that I found the sweet spot, what I would like to use the camera for. And the Canon C70 is seeing more studio time than actually running and gunning than the Sony FX6. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Now, there's also another reason is that I'm still getting familiar with the Sony FX6. And in my opinion, it's just a Sony. You know, I've been shooting with Sony for, what, 5-6 years now. And I'm very familiar with their mirrorless camera. However, this one is a cinema camera. And for a lot of you guys that have been thinking about getting an FX6 as your very first cinema camera, this video is for you. And by the way, this is live, so in case you're watching the pre-recorded episode, feel free to drop your comments, because I'm going to be continue to interact with you guys on the chat. Now, let's see. Yes, we are completely live right now. So, guys, as always, where are you guys watching us from tonight? We'd love to know what part of the world you're watching this episode right now. Drop your location down in the chat. Also, if you have any particular question, let me know, because the first thing that we're going to be talking about is, and I only have one camera set up today, so I apologize if I go out of focus. But we're going to be talking about what you should expect from, I'm going to put it right here, what you should expect from someone that is actually a mirrorless shooter, hybrid shooter, someone that has been relying on mirrorless camera, any camera, Canon cameras, Canon 80D, Canon 70D, 60D, Sony A7 III, Fuji cameras, X-T2, X-T3, X-T4, you get it. But any of you guys that are trying to app the video game, the cinema game, and you have been thinking about a camera like the Sony FX6, and why not any of the other Sony cameras, cinema cameras. Now, there is a reason why this camera is going to become very popular if it's not already. And one of the reasons is that this camera, although, while it's not a cheap camera, it cost me $6,000. It is the cheapest cinema camera that you can get from Sony right now. Yes, I know we are expecting the Sony FX3, but the camera is not out at the moment of this video. So let's talk about the things that we can actually go and buy now today. So let's talk about the form factor of this camera, because this is going to be one of the main things that obviously you're going to notice, at a glance when you hold one of these cameras. Holding a mirrorless camera, holding this camera is a complete different game. And I don't mean it by the weight of the camera. It is a complete different way when it comes to ergonomics. One of the things that I love about this camera is this particular grip right here, especially for those shooters that tend to, hold the camera with no gimbals by holding the body of the camera. This is actually something really handy, and it is something that now that I have it, I really appreciate it over the Canon C70. The reason why is because the Canon C70 has a grip, and that grip looks more like the grip of a mirrorless camera, right? But that grip doesn't tilt, and you're gonna find out that when you're working with larger bodies, angling your hands like this or angling your hands like this, it's going to start taking a toll in your wrist. And I'm talking about because I shot with this camera the other day for about 3.5 hours nonstop, recording, stopping, but nonstop in the set. And by the second hour, I was actually glad that I had this tiltable handle, because I was shooting without, cracking the handle. And, then I decided to give it a try. And yeah, it makes a whole different, it's just a completely different game, guys. Being able to angle the grip just to position your camera in a particular way to give you a much more comfortable, shooting experience is actually priceless. And this is one of the little details that you're going to realize that this camera is going to enhance the way you shoot. And I'm mentioning this because there are a lot of little things like this one that makes the whole experience of shooting with a cinema camera something completely different from mirrorless. But at the same time, you know, there are a lot of things that are still very similar, and it's one of the reasons why, you know, I've been liking this camera so much. Now with the Canon C70, like I mentioned before, we had a fixed grip, and you're not going to realize it if you never, you know, use the camera with one of those twisting grips. You're not going to realize it until you actually have one. So I actually really like the fact that this camera has one. Now, the other great thing is that this camera is very modular. So as you guys can see, you know, the handle is one of the parts that the camera has, and also the top handle. So the side and the top handle. The good thing about this camera is that you can remove them both, and to remove them is so easy. So let's say I want to mount this camera in a gimbal and just, you know, just keep the box alone. I can do that. I can simply remove the grip by, it's kind of like a lens system, the way it plugs in. It just, there you go. As you can see, it comes off. It looks kind of like a lens mount, believe it or not. And it has a little push button right there. That is what you actually push in order to crack the grip and twist it, and it locks in place. Also, just like the lens, there is a registration right there. I don't know if you can see that white dot that you have to align with another white dot. So putting this thing is actually a no-brainer. It also has a cable, because if you don't connect the cable, you don't have contact. Now, one of the things that I wish this camera has, as a mechanical engineer that I am, is that you have some sort of connectivity like you have in a lens, you know, something that would allow the camera to connect without this wire. A lot of the times I feel that I can actually over twist that wire. Like, I don't know if you can see right there. And again, this one is going to be an informal video because I'm planning to do a edited video version of this live for you guys to enjoy, minus, you know, all the rumbling and the one camera situation. But like I mentioned before, you know, you have to connect that cable. Now, there is another portion of the camera that's actually crucial, and it is the top handle. Now, the top handle comes with the Xlr module, and you have, as audio input, 3 audio input. Maybe you have more. I just found 3. So the 2 ones are going to be this Xlr adapters right there, as you can see. 1, 2 right there. All right. And the other one is going to be the built-in microphone that's right there at the top of the handle. So I got to tell you that it is actually very handy. You also have a shock mount here to mount, you know, a shotgun microphone if you want to, you know, capture your audio that way. And it's actually really good because, you know, I don't have to add any module or anything like that. Now, the problem that you're going to have is that you can, you know, remove this handle completely, but the moment you remove the handle, you eliminate all the audio inputs. Now, I wish that this camera has something more like the Canon C70, where it has all the ports on the body, but I can see why it doesn't have those ports. You know, the camera is actually pretty much crammed with inputs, dials, not inputs, I'm sorry, dials, buttons, you know, yeah, it's pretty much, you know, there are some outputs right there and inputs as well. As you can see, I promise for the next live, I'm going to have an overhead camera, guys. But it is what it is with this camera. Now, one thing for sure is that I rarely don't use the camera with a handle, because the handle is so convenient. Let me show you the handle. Actually, the top of the handle. As you can see, the top of the handle has a bunch of controls. You have a move and record button. You even have a dial right there that you can configure for, you know, the ISO. You also have a zoom rocker right there. As you can see, it's right over there for those lenses that have electronic zooming, or if you want to enable clear zooming, you know, with any lens, it'll allow you to actually zoom right there. And it has also some configurable buttons, and on top of that, you have some mounting options right there. So it is really well designed. You also have, I believe this one is a hot shoe mount right there. Yes, you also have a hot shoe mount, so you can also install in there, you know, some of the Sony's electronic devices, such as, you know, the lavalier that also connects via the hot shoe mount without the need of any cables. You also can connect some of those shotgun microphones from Sony that also can connect directly from the hot shoe mount. So that is actually pretty good, guys. Ezan Yosef, how you doing? Good morning from Pakistan. We have William Portela, awesome camera. Greetings from Brazil. Yeah, guys, so make sure to drop your comments here, whatever questions you may have, so you know, we can actually answer and address those. All right, so when it comes to the top handle, you know, it's one of the best top handle that I've seen, and I've seen quite a few cameras. You know, this is my second cinema camera, but I have friends that have other cinema cameras. It is one of the nicest top handles that I have seen so far, and I'm sure that there may be other handles that probably are equivalent, but as far as I know, this one is great. Now, remember the grip. The grip has also the same redundancy. And on the grip, you also have a move or record button. You have a front dial. You have also a zoom rocker right there. So, I mean, it's just incredible. And you even have a custom button. And you also have, forgot to mention this before, you also have right here a joystick. So you can move your focusing points, you know, with that joystick. And you have another one right over here on top of the camera. And again, sorry guys for having one camera, but you know, I just wanted this video very quick before going to bed. I promise an in-depth video. All right, so we're talking about the handle. We talked about actually both handles. Now, it doesn't end right there. You also have a lot of options, the same options pretty much on the body. And on the body, I mean, like I mentioned before, it's loaded with options. So as you can see right there, you have another, you have another movie record button right there. You also have dials on the body, and as you can see, a bunch of configurable buttons all around the body. So when it comes to customization, I mean, you cannot complain with this camera because it gives you, in my opinion, everything you're looking for plus more. Now, the Canon C70 also has a lot of, you know, customization, but you only have one movie record button, you know, you only have one, you know, set of dials and so on. So this camera has almost three sets of things. So it really allows you to customize this camera however you want. So I could actually remove right now that top handle, and to remove it is super simple. All you have to do is remove those two knobs right there. And you don't need any tools, you know, do it by hand. And yes, and you can actually rock the bare bone body, and you can imagine how it is. Now, one thing that I'm doing is I'm not removing the top handle because I actually manage all the cable that goes from the monitor into the camera pretty well. And I'm kind of lazy, but it is so small, this camera, that actually allows me to pack it in my Manfrotto bag. Let me show you right now. So I pack it right there. So I don't have to remove the top handle. The only handle that I remove is the side handle because it only has one cable, and you know, it's really easy to replace. But that's one of the things that I love about this camera, that, you know, while, you know, with the top handle it's a little bit bulky, still very manageable to actually pack it in your, you know, your backpack or your suitcase, whatever the case may be. Now look at the size of my hand and look at the size of the camera. It's not a big camera at all, you know, and it's actually pretty amazing. Now, I was eyeing the FX9 before, and I just felt that the body was actually huge for my needs, for, you know, what I'm used to. I like light setups, you know, and sometimes I'm even lazy. I don't even want to bring gimbals, but you know, the good thing about this camera is that it's going to allow you to fly on a gimbal, no problem. You know, most gimbals are gonna, I mean, most robust gimbals are gonna be able to handle this camera. Now, let's talk a little bit about lenses, because this camera is gonna use the same E-mount lenses that you already have if you're a Sony shooter. So that's also another thing that really appealed to me. You know, I don't have to go and buy new lenses, and something that if I get, for example, a Blackmagic Pro right now, the 6K, the new one, or any of the Blackmagic cameras, I would have to go and buy lenses, you know, because either I have to, you know, use Micro Four Thirds lenses or EF mount. I sell all my EF mount, and right now I only have RF and Sony glass. So I can use everything that you guys see over there in this camera, no problem, you know, and it works really good. Now let's talk about one of the main features that for me was actually a must in order to get this camera, and that was going to be autofocus. Now, the The reason why I like autofocus in a cinema camera is not necessarily because I am going to be relying on tracking, you know, a person through the eye, but it is because it makes it so easy to actually acquire focus and switch to manual focus if you want to, you know, capture a scene, you know. A lot of the times, you know, when I'm filming either, you know, a product, or when I'm filming a, you know, little reel, or, you know, an action, a small clip, I use manual focus because I don't want my focus to, you know, start hunting or whatever. You know, I set my focus to a point and then I just let the action happen. So by having autofocus, you know, it's really easy for me to let the camera acquire autofocus, turn it off, and, you know, start recording. So that's one of the things. And with the Canon C70, while the Canon C70 has autofocus, it's nowhere near this camera. So if you're someone that comes from mirrorless camera, let's say you come from Sony a7 III and you're used to that workflow, this camera is going to be very similar. Now, I say very similar because this camera is not as fast when it comes to focus, or let me actually rephrase. It's not as accurate most of the time like a Sony a7 III, but it is very, very close. Now, comparing this camera to the C70, this camera is 10 times faster at acquiring focus. And this is something that, you know, most cinema cameras actually struggle or don't have, because just now cinema cameras are starting to add reliable autofocus. Like I mentioned before, there are some cameras, even red camera, ARRI cameras, that don't have autofocus. And that's the way it's been for years. So you know, this is the closest thing to, I believe, to a mirrorless, you know, autofocus experience, the, you know, the same system that Sony uses for the other cameras. Now, there's a little problem in this camera, not a problem, but this camera actually lacks of a feature that I use a lot, and that is actually tracking. At the time of this video, we don't have tracking in the FX6. So that's actually a bummer, because tracking, it is something that I actually use. But I have the Sony a7S III, so, you know, if I have to shoot something that requires tracking, I'll use the Sony a7S III. You know, say I'm shooting a sport, or let's say I'm shooting a hand motion. In that sense, you know, I use tracking. Now, I think that Sony is going to add tracking to the Sony FX6 in the future via firmware update. You know, Sony has been updating their cameras, you know, pretty frequently right now, and they've been listening to the users, and a lot of people are asking for the same thing with this camera. Now, the fact that it doesn't have tracking is not a deal breaker. Like I mentioned before, chances are that you already have a mirrorless camera that has tracking that you could use, you know, in those situations, or you can simply just go manual focus, or, you know, get creative, put a focus module, whatever the case may be. But this is not stopping me from enjoying the camera. Now, let's talk about this little guy right there, and this one right here. So this little guy right here is the provided screen that comes with the camera. You know, you cannot buy the camera without the screen. Now, let me tell you, it is touchscreen, but it's a limited touchscreen. It's once again different than the touchscreen capabilities of the Sony a7S III. And the touchscreen of this camera works, but a lot of the times you have to execute functions from the menu in order to enable touchscreen. The menus are not fully touchscreen, and even the touch to focus, while the camera has that capability, you actually have to start it first by pressing a key. I actually have configured this key to start focus. This one right here, the number 5 in the grip. That key actually prompts the menu for focusing options. I press it, I select the focusing, you know, zone or flexible, and then you can actually drag the focusing with your fingers. Now, the funny thing is that because this camera has everything right here around the thumb, what I end up doing is I actually end up enabling and actually controlling the focus with a joystick that is right over there. I don't even have the need to actually touch, which is actually weird, because on the Sony a7S III, you know, I just boom, 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 go with the fingers much faster. I just find it for the type of work that I'm doing right now that it's much faster and more accurate to actually use the joystick, but it works actually really, really good. All right, let's talk about the menus, because Sony is known for being controversial when it comes to the menus. Now, the menus of these cameras are going to be completely different, and let me actually show you. I'll give you let me see. See? Oh, the screen didn't flip. Maybe there is a function there. I never had the need to vlog with this camera, so I haven't enabled it yet. But let me actually press the menu. Actually, long press. All right, so let me actually show you like this. So this is the menu of, and I'm at f1.4, so sorry about that. This is the menu in a nutshell of the Sony FX6. It is what it is, you know. It's actually similar to the one from the Sony a7S III, but things are scattered all over the place in this menu. So if you thought that Sony menus were confusing, well, this one took me like a probably good week to get familiar with the menus. You know, once you remember, of course, you know, you can find the options, but I don't understand why they leave menus, you know, always at the end. They just don't improve the menus. I think that that would be something that I would love to, you know, the engineers to pay a lot of attention, because a lot of the times in the middle of the shoot, you want to do something so simple as formatting your card. If, you know, it could actually turn into a couple of seconds or minutes in trying to find out where the option is. So that's that. Now, once again, this screen is also modular. You don't have to mount it here. In fact, you can actually mount it whatever you want. Whatever you see a 1/4-inch thread, you can actually mount that screen, and you can actually remove it completely if you want, and, you know, use an Atomos or something like that. I haven't done that yet because, to be honest with you, I find the screen good enough for the type of things that I've been doing. I have been using the HDMI out to, you know, monitor in a bigger monitor. I have been doing that, but I haven't replaced the screen as my main source to, you know, preview stuff, you know. So it is a good thing. Now, since I was talking about HDMI, this camera also has full-size HDMI and SDI out, you know, which is actually really, really good. There you go. And it also has time code. So you have SDI out right there. Let me actually show you. Let me see if I can remove it. It has this rubberish plugs, as you can see. Beam, 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 focus, focus, focus. You have the SDI out right there, and at the bottom you have another one for time code. Now, SDI out is probably what I would use, you know, in my next monitor. I would actually buy a monitor with SDI out. Right now, you know, I'm using the Atomos Ninja 5, which is only HDMI, but SDI out is actually much more secure, more reliable, especially because it's going to be hanging right here on the back of the camera, and your hand can actually, you know, I just don't feel very secure, you know, using an HDMI cable there. Now, let me show you another thing. The monitor actually plugs in this connector right there. So as you can see, you route the cable all around the grip, and that's it. Now, let's talk about one of the main features of this camera that by far there are very few cameras out there. I mean, I only know of 2 cameras. I believe the Sigma FP has some sort of ND filters as well, but it's going to be the variable ND filter, guys. So the variable ND filter is this piece right there, and it is, oh Lord, focus there. Oops. There you go, there you go, there you go. Come on, come on, come on. Let me show you there. There you go. You can see the wheel. That's the variable ND filter right there. You can even read it right now. And the variable ND filter is a game changer for me for several reasons. Number one reason is that when you are filming, the ND filter can actually drop, you know, in increments of, you know, 1/4, I believe it is. Or you can actually finally graduate the ND filter, basically having a smooth transition that if you do it so slow, you don't even notice it in the footage. Now, that is a game changer for me, because anytime I use an ND filter, even if I screw an ND filter here, or if I use the one on my my Canon C70, that one drops every 2 stops. Now, 2 stops of exposure, it's 2 stops of exposure. So that means that you're either going to be overexposed or underexposed. And if you just want to tweak your NDs, well, you cannot do it with most cameras out there with built-in ND filters, because they just drop in, you know, big increments, you know, 1/4 stop, 1/2 stop, 1 stop, 2 stop, like this, the Canon C70. But this one, you can simply graduate this wheel and get such a fine adjustment that you don't even see the transition in the footage, especially if you do it very, very, very slow. Now, that is great, but it doesn't end right there. The other great thing is this button right here. Let me see. The other great thing of this camera is this button right there. Let me show you. ND Auto. So basically what it does is if you hold that button for a couple of seconds, it would actually automatically adjust the ND degree for you. So that means that you can have all the parameters, configure for the worst case scenario when it comes to, overexposure. And the ND filter would actually graduate slowly to make sure that your footage is actually properly exposed. Now, it is not perfect. A lot of the times, exposes some things that I don't want to expose. But for most of the time, or especially when the auto ND feature weaknesses, you can use it in certain situations just to make your life a lot easier. So the other day, I had to hold the camera so steady because this camera doesn't have image stabilization. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So I was actually with both of my hands basically grabbing the camera like this, holding it towards my chest, and I was filming. I was doing it with the other side. And I just let the ND filter, take over. And there was a lot of variation of light because we actually were going over the light. I was shooting a person, and it was incredible. The camera did such a great job that I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go to the computer and see up, the stepping of the exposure. But it was just a fine adjustment, so fine that I was able to grade the footage without actually touching the exposure in post. That was game changer. So that's that. And again, it also lets you drop the ND by increments, by big gaps of increments, and you can also configure that increment. So it's actually incredible, guys. Yes. So that's why if the FX3 doesn't have ND, I'm not interested. Simple as that. No need for that camera if it doesn't have the same ND filter system. And I know that it's not going to have it because I already leaked that information here in the channel. All right. So like I mentioned before, there are a lot of customizations around the camera, guys. So many customizations. And I'll let you take a look at this while I read some of your questions right now. So, okay, so we have X-Base Films from Nigeria. What's happening, my man? How's everything going on in Nigeria? I hope you guys are staying safe. William Portela, which camera do you use in this live stream? Amazing quality. The camera that I'm using right now is the Sony A7C. And you are damn right. The quality of the Sony A7C, I'm not processing any LUT or anything like that. It's going directly to my OBS, to my computer, to my Elgato 4K capture card, to the computer, and that's it. And then I have a Zoom recorder right here with this Zoom microphone that actually sounds really good and it's not too cheap. Let me know what you think about the sound. That's it, yeah. Sony C70. I gotta do a video about my setup right here, guys, because I wish I could show you this. It's actually very simple. Look what I'm using as a bounce card. One of this Amazon, when you order groceries from Amazon, well, this is actually reflecting. It's in a stand right there. So I say those bags because I use them all the time. There you go. It's the filler that you see right here. All right, so that's that, guys. So let me actually continue to read some of those questions. I love the bag. All right, William Portela. Cinema cameras have a beautiful grain in videos. Mirrorless and DSLRs don't have this effects, or I'm wrong. Yes, you're right. However, the grain of the Sony FX6 is very minimal because this camera pushes such a clean feed. It has, which is what we're going to talk about right now. It has dual ISO. People are saying that the only camera that has dual ISO is the FX9. This one has kind of like an emulation and a noise reduction version of a high ISO or something like that. Whatever the case may be, the Sony FX6 has a base ISO of 800, whereas the Sony A7S III has a base ISO of 640. So you can go a little bit lower in the ISO. However, the Sony FX6 and the Sony A7S III They both have the same high ISO at 12,800, which is also really, really handy. Now, the Sony FX9 has the second, this camera has a dual ISO, the second ISO at 4,000, but that one is a true dual ISO. So the camera can actually expose at the same level of noise, either with 800 or 4,000. This one, I don't know what the wizardry goes on, but at 12,800, I mean, it just does no noise. It does no noise at all. Not as clean as 800, but it's very, very close. So I can understand why people are saying that it's not a true dual ISO camera. All right, so next question that I'm going to tell you without you even asking me. But this is a question that a lot of people have been asking in the channel and social media. So this camera features the same sensor as the Sony A7S III, guys, and we're gonna show you because it's so easy to show you the sensor here. So this is the sensor. As you can see, it's full frame. And it is exactly the same. Exactly the same. Now, people say that this camera is the little sister brother of the FX9, but the FX9 has a sensor that downsample from 6K to 4K, whereas this one, the sensor shoots in 4K. So once again, same sensor as the Sony A7S III, and it is going to be the same sensor that the Sony FX3 is going to have as well. So when it comes to image quality, you know, you take advantage of the entire focal range of your lenses, which is actually really, really good and important. And also one of the reasons why going with the C70, I kind of like feel that when I shoot with my 24 to 105 or my 24 to 70, I'm not at 24 anymore. I'm more of 30 millimeters or something like that. So, you know, that's the good thing about full frame, that you can actually go gunning and running with a 24 to 105, which is, you know, a lens that actually has image stabilization and is the best lens, you know, for the money for this camera, in my opinion. I am at 24 to 105. That's actually great. Now, the other reason why it's great that this camera is full frame and that you can take full advantage of all the lenses that are out there is because you are going to be able to recompose your image stabilization in post using Catalyst Browse. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you this in just a moment, because this camera does not have image stabilization, not even digital image stabilization. And I wish the camera had digital image stabilization. I don't know if Sony can actually enable that via firmware, because it's kind of digital software, but it would be really, really good if this camera, you know, gives you some sort of digital option. One of the reasons why I may actually shoot or take the Canon C70, because A, it has image stabilization digital. B, most of the zoom lenses from Canon RF has image stabilization, whereas most of all the zoom lenses from Sony don't have image stabilization, and almost none of the good lenses from Sony have image stabilization. Did I say Canon or Sony? I mean Sony. Canon RF, good image stabilization lenses. Sony, yes. Now, one of the lenses that I've been using a lot is the Sigma 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8, which is the lens that goes for $1,100, correct me from wrong. And I'll be taking care of the chat, guys. Just give me 1 second. Keep pouring all of your questions right here in the thing. But one of the lenses that I've been using is the 24 to 70 Sigma lens. I love that lens because it's a little bit smaller than the G Master version, and I just like the quality of that lens. I haven't had any issues. I've heard that some people had issues. I had no issues. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think, and this is kind of like a prediction, I think that Sony is going to introduce a new line of G Master lenses, or maybe they're going to be called something else, and they're going to be introducing image stabilization in the lenses. And probably one of the reasons why Sony allowed Sigma to create a 24 to 70 with no image stabilization, I think that Sony is coming out with a 24 to 70 or something similar with image stabilization. And once they do that, you're best assured that I am going to get it, because it is going to be perfect for this type of cameras. And probably another indication why they decided to release cameras without image stabilization. Now, a lot of the cinema cameras don't have image stabilization, or even digital. So it's not something foreign to the cinema world not having image stabilization. But, you know, Sony specifically has been working with the Alpha division, you know, engineering this camera and the FX9 and now the FX3. And we're starting to see camera companies really bring those, you know, great features from mirrorless to the cinema world. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a cinema videographer or Steven Spielberg from any, you know, from any kind, but, you know, I've been shooting a lot of video, guys. You know, my work entails to shoot a lot of videos, capture, you know, you do a lot of product videos, and I've been getting very into, you know, the right gear for the right job. I truly believe in that. So let's talk about image stabilization then. So how do you stabilize a footage from this camera if you don't have image stabilization of any sort? Boom. Well, Sony has done something very, very unique. And what they have done is they have added gyro data into the clip, you know, into the file that you're recording. So as you record the clip, you're also recording that metadata into, you know, the file. And that is great because you can use a free software from Sony, and they also have a paid version called Catalyst Browse or Catalyst Prepare. And I'm actually gonna switch right now to this view, guys. Let me actually go to Catalyst, and you can see Catalyst right now. Let me show you how awesome it is to stabilize footage from this camera using Catalyst Browse. All right, so right now, these are some of the clips that I shot the other day, and they are non-processed. You know, they were shot, what you see right now is straight out of camera, but they have applied a conversion lot right here, and you can actually see it. Where is it? Let me see. File here. Okay, so once you upload your files, or you know, you choose the folder that you want to start stabilizing footage, let's actually go with this one. I'm going to double click right here. I am going to play this footage, and you can see that over here it looks a little bit overexposed. Let me actually see if I can bring the scopes out. Where were the scopes? I haven't been using this for a while. Reset color adjustment, apply color preset. See over here, color adjustment. There you go. All right, so this is the footage, and as you guys can see, I have my histogram right here. You also have adjustment in Catalyst Browse, you know, and this is the software that you utilize to stabilize the footage, but you can also use this software to individually grade your footage. So, you know, I can actually tweak the exposure right here, or the brightness, how they're calling it here. You know, there are a sequence of adjustments that I can do right here. I was actually messing around. Let me actually do that. You can actually adjust it, you know, by manipulating the curves. You know, if you want to reduce a little bit of that, you know, highlights, and maybe a little bit of the, you know, the highs from the midtones, and maybe, you know, you want to raise there. As you can see right here, we have this histogram with the before and after. I mean, it's very powerful. You can also tweak your color temperature right there. And as you can see right here, I'm working with a kind of like a lot applied to this image because I shot the image in S-Log 3, as you can see right there. So you have the different options right here. I can actually show the footage the way I shot it, and this is the way I shot it. That's why, you know, it looked a little bit overexposed, because it just applied a 709 LUT right there, a Rec 709. So let me actually use it with that LUT applied. Now, when I'm gonna export this, the LUT is not going to be applied. I can actually choose to, but I'm not. But what I wanna show you guys is this video right here, this clip. Now, see how shaky it is, the footage, and as you can see, we're seeing the same shakiness on the other side. Now, this is the after, and the after is showing me kind of like the little gradation that I just did there, you know. Let me actually make it a little bit darker so you can tell. Let me actually change the white balance a little bit so you can also tell. You know, I made it bluish on purpose and decided a little bit of green tint right there. All right, so this one right here on the right is the one graded. Now, check this out. The fun starts when you start stabilizing this footage. So I just press the button, and what you're gonna see on the right is already stabilized. Now, look at the left and right, before and after, and look at the difference. I mean, this is freaking unbelievable, guys. This is actually gimbal quality, in my opinion. You know, I have the focus hunting there. That was one of the tests. but I'll play it again for you guys. I'm actually gonna leave it looping so you can actually appreciate how well, you know, the image stabilization works in Catalyst Browse, and you know how much it can save your day by having this feature. Now, the other great feature is that you can adjust the amount of crop that the software is suggesting for the proper image stabilization. I can actually choose to crop even more for almost no motion at all. And look at that. It is actually incredible how well it stabilizes. So you have full control of the image stabilization. For the most time, you know, auto actually works really, really good. I'm not going to say that. Okay. Let me actually show you with another footage. Let's see this one right here. No, this one is not too unstable. Let's actually pick another one. All right. All right, so let's stabilize this one. Let's do it again. Boom. I just let the software choose the proper image stabilization, and look at the difference, guys. So it is actually really, really good. What I would do here, I mean, it cropped too much. It is smart, but it's not very smart. So I would actually go 90, and even, you know, as I go lower in the percentage, obviously I zoom less. But as you can see, you know, a lot of the times, you know, the software is not that smart, and it may read a motion that you intended as shakiness, and it will try to correct it for you. So check that out in the loop. Alrighty. So let's go back to the scene that we were before. So, all right. So let me actually bring back. There you go, you guys. All right, so as you guys can see, you know, Catalyst Browse works really, really good. Now, a lot of people are saying that you have to increase your shutter speed. And I shot this, if I'm not mistaken, at a shutter speed of 180 degrees. And that's one of the great things of this camera, that you can choose shutter speed or shutter degree. So I had this camera set up at 180, meaning that it's gonna be double the frame rate. So if I was shooting at 24 frames per second, my shutter speed is gonna be 48 frames per second, and the camera does it automatically. So if I switch to S and Q, I don't have to touch shutter. The camera knows that it needs to double it at 180 degrees. You can also tweak the degree of your shutter manually. So that is actually really good. So now, one of the things that Catalyst Browse has is that it is a very basic program. And unfortunately, there is no batch stabilizing, or I couldn't find it. So if you want to stabilize, let's say 100 clips, like, you know, this take actually had over 100 clips. If I want to do that, I have to actually select one clip, stabilize it, color correct it, export it, save it, and do the same over and over with my clips. So what I would actually do for Sony is that they would actually allow you to kind of like set all the magnitude of the cropping that you want for your image stabilization in all the clips, and give you kind of like a fast workflow. So you can select one, you know, say, okay, I want to go stable at 90%, select the second one, and then at the end, you do a batch or a dump into a disk, into a folder. Now, that capability is not there yet. I'm assuming that, you know, because this is just new technology from Sony, we are going to see this software improving. But what I'm really excited is for Sony to release a Premiere plugin, because instead of using the warp stabilizer that I've been using for all this year, you know, it would be nice to have this capability. Now, one thing that you have to understand is that the gyro data is not guessing, you know, your image stabilization based on pixel, which is how the warp stabilizers, you know, does stabilize your footage. You know, it analyzes point in your footage, and it guesses, you know, basically what you meant. That's the reason why a lot of the times you get those wobbly, you know, artifacts, you know, happening, and sometimes you can even salvage the footage. Now, with Catalyst Browse and the gyro data, the camera has the coordinate of the sensor in space. So when it dumps it right there, it is super easy for the software to analyze the footage. All it has to do is read the coordinates, you know, and basically shift the image according to those coordinates in order to give you stable footage. So you don't lose sharpness in your image unless, you know, the cropping is very substantial, or unless there is a lot of motion blur. And this is one of the reasons why people say that you have to use a faster shutter speed. So when you move, you're not recording motion blur. You're actually capturing, sharp frames. So I don't know. I actually been using, the 180-degree rule. So my shutter speed was 48, 48, 1 under 48 seconds shutter speed. And I didn't have a problem. Now, this particular video wasn't, someone running in the field or anything like that. I was kind of like still. They were slide panning, and my motion was not actually, very, very sudden. Although, there were some sudden motion, but something that you have to keep in mind, because if you're maybe filming a person running or something like that, I can see how that may actually make sense to have a faster shutter speed so you don't render motion blur, because then you are going to see that motion blur, even more noticeable when Catalyst Browse is trying to stabilize your footage. But that's that. Now, another thing that you could probably do, I'm thinking, is you could probably use a faster shutter speed, maybe, a faster frame rate, maybe shooting at 60 frames per second, for example, and then, you would have to dump it in a 60 frames per second timeline. So, again, I still have to do a lot of experimenting with this, but, so far, so good. All right, I'll continue, guys, reading your comments. And let me know what other questions you have about the FX6. I'll try to reply to all of you. Oh, all right. So William Portela say autofocus in cinema camera is more smooth. Yeah, it's actually smooth. The transition of the autofocus is not as aggressive, and you also have more control of the response. And what's the other parameter? One is the response, and the other one sensitivity. So you have those two parameters that you can tweak to kind of like get a focus pulling type of effect, which is actually really, really good. Esan Yusuf say, I love this because the more customization is handy. I was just thinking the grip is movable but not removable. After watching it, it's really amazing feature. Yeah, I really love that feature of the grip. And now when I grab my Canon C70, I wish I could crack the grip too. And no. Mark Hoyne said, top of menu there is a switch for mirror. Oh yeah, you're right. I saw that. Yeah, there is, mirror right here. There is a switch to flip the screen. There you go. See, I haven't had the need to actually flip the screen. Haven't been blogging with this, but hey, thank you for that one. So Michael Maestro Pierce say, there is a button at the bottom of the screen. Yes, sir. I just saw it. Thank you very much. William Portela, he's using the 24 f1.4 lens with the Sony A7C in this live. Yes, I am actually using the 24mm f1.4 with the Sony A7C, and I am at, if I'm not mistaken, I think okay. Yes, I am at 24 frames per second, because when you go on 30 frames per second in the Sony A7C, it crops a little bit more. So that's why. I love the 24 f1.4 for this type of things. Look at the image, the background separation that we get. That's actually insane. Not that I would actually be that close to the camera, but yeah. All right, Meat by Products say, I love dual ISO. Joe Answer, what's up, buddy? Joe Answer and I, we've been collaborating in some stuff at work as well. Great creator. William Portela, give a like. Is this live, guys? Give a like. Is this guy's live? Yeah, this is completely live, guys. Michael Mestre Pierce, one of the biggest features I love about the FX6 is the ability to store 16 custom LUT in the camera. You can edit them and bake the LUT or apply in post. No other camera can do this. Yes, I was actually reading about that. You have 16, he says, inputs, where you can actually either make your own LUTs or import LUTs from other people. So I believe that, once you get the grip of this camera and you learn how to expose, because I'm going to talk about how to expose in this camera because it's a little bit different. You could probably, create different LUTs, and, if you're in a rush, just, bake those LUTs in there. However, it's so nice to have the footage in S-Log 3, because once you bake in a LUT or once you bake in a look, it's baked in. There's no way back. And, a lot of the times if you want the utmost flexibility, or, you do something for a client and then the client say, you know what, I don't like so much green in the footage. Can you darken the scene a little bit more? Once you're baked in, a lot of the times, it's really hard to go back. So in my opinion, I think that baking in LUTs and stuff like that could be for specific situations, but I wouldn't actually want to risk a day of shooting by baking in a LUT, you know. So that's that. Now this camera also has S-Cinetone, which a lot of people love, and I've heard that the Sony a7S III is also going to get S-Cinetone via firmware update. I just did a video, and of course it makes a lot of sense because now they want to put the Sony a7S III, you know, on par with this type of camera. So kind of like implying that the Sony a7S III is now a cinema camera, and yeah, that's what we're gonna get. So Paul Holiday, you got the C70 and the FX6? Yes, sir. I got the C70. Oh, I have it right here. So here is the Canon C70. I love it, guys. It's another great camera. Now, since we're talking about the C70, let's talk about what makes this camera so cool really quick. What makes it so cool, it is a lot easier to shoot with this camera, a lot closer to a mirrorless than it is to actually navigating the menus, using the camera, and exposing. The FX9 is a little bit harder to expose, it's a little bit harder to learn, but it took me a couple of days. That's it. So I'm not that smart, so you could probably figure out in less than that. So, but again, if you're looking for a camera that it is, you know, straight, kind of like mirrorless experience, or especially if you're a Canon shooter, I mean, you are not, oops, bumped it again. Again, you're not going to be wrong with the Canon C70, and I love it. I'm not selling this camera. I'm going to continue shooting with this camera, and I love shooting with this camera and finding an excuse to actually use both. But this one, more of studio work and personal stuff, you know, fixed. I have it in the studio. I mean, I brought it back today because of the weekend, but I had it at the studio. I was doing some, you know, some product shots, and I really like the way, you know, the way this camera sits, you know, and performs, and, you know, and how easy it is to use. Now let's talk about exposure of the Sony FX6, because when it comes to exposure, this camera has option galore. Now you can use this camera as a conventional, you know, mirrorless camera where you can set your shutter speed, your ISO, and your aperture, and, you know, that will be probably where most people are going to be at. Give me a second. But you also have the what is called the Cine exposure indexing. Now this is kind of like a method of exposing, and the way it works kind of like how film, you know, works in cameras. So I'm not gonna go through the entire process because it took me a while to learn it, and actually I don't think that I qualified to give you a class on Cine Cine exposure indexing. But basically what it is that you set your camera to shoot either to the base ISO or your high ISO, and then what you do is you kind of like drop the indexing. Picture your graph, you know, your proper exposure and a middle line, right? Now you could actually drop the middle line or raise the middle line and affect the exposure. And this camera has where are the switches? There you go. Let me just put it here. And this camera has right here you see L, M, and H, stands low, medium, and high. You can actually set up the exposure indexing levels there. I hope I'm saying this right, but if your base ISO is 800, I set my high setting to 800. Never shoot above never shoot above the base ISO. And then I have one at 400 and another one at 200. So I can actually drop my entire exposure and move it up and down. Now, this is not going to affect the S-Log, because when you shoot in Cine EI, you always shoot in S-Log 3. It's not going to affect the brightness of your S-Log. It affects the brightness of the monitor. But what that does, it gives you kind of like a representation of how you're going to be able to, you know, how shadows and highlights are behaving when you go and pose and you try to, you know, raise or lower your highlights. So something like that. I don't want to get too much in depth, I mentioned before, but shooting like that is so easy because all you have to do, set your base ISO. Remember, you have variables in D in this camera, so the entire compensation of your exposure is going to be done by the variable ND, whether you want to use them manually, whether you want to set them gradually, or whether you want to use them automatic. Yeah, it is that good, guys. So I decided to learn that, you know, the Cine EI, and to be honest with you, that's the only mode I shoot. I don't deal with ISOs anymore. You know, it's actually really good, guys, and it allows you to kind of like understand how you know, the outcome of your footage, because this camera also has vector scope, and this camera also has waveform, and waveform is what I use to actually determine, you know, my scene, if I'm overexposed or underexposed. So it's actually really, really good. I was watching a lot of videos and reading a lot on how to expose properly, you know, S-Log3 Cine EI with this camera. And, you know, it took me a few hours to really understand it and a bunch of tests, but it's actually really good, guys. So, you know, at first it's going to seem overwhelming, you know, coming to this camera and seeing all these buttons and all this, everything is different. Even formatting, the word formatting is called initialize. I mean, some other cameras do that, but you know, everything's going to throw you off for a moment, you know, until you get familiar with the camera. But all I can tell you is that it just makes it a lot more fun to shoot, guys. You know, I have the Sony a7S III as well, and I can see how I would use the Sony a7S III now as a B cam, or probably I would actually use the Sony a7S III for gimbal work before I dismantle this camera and mount it in a gimbal. I don't know yet. I don't know if I would actually have the need to put this camera in a gimbal having the Sony a7S III, because in reality, the image quality is almost the same. You know, in fact, I did a test yesterday. I couldn't notice any difference. You know, I was exposing both, you know, the same way, and dumped the footage in Premiere. It was the same. White balance was all the same. I even zoomed in. Even the noise was the same. So it's, you know, incredible, guys. I think the difference is going to be for those that are considering the Sony a7S III or this camera, is going to be all those little details that is going to enhance the shooting experience. You know, the ergonomics of the camera, even though this camera actually looks heavy, it's actually not heavy. Look at that. I'm just holding it with one hand like nothing. It's very light. You know, having redundancy of controls. You know, how many times, you know, you wanted to press a button and you were in a position that, you know, it made it so uncomfortable. So here you have buttons everywhere. You know, you can always have your hand here and had a set of buttons, you know, all around your hand, or you can grab the camera with the other hand and kind of like decide, you know, how to operate the camera, even, you know, on the side. You know, there are bigger buttons, bigger dials, bigger controls, plenty of customization, and it's awesome. Now, let me actually talk a little bit before I finish about audio, because as you can see, you have the two controls right there for the Xlr Inputs, and even that is so well placed, you know, on the side of the camera. Is really, really good. For those that are familiar with the Sony Xlr module, which is the one that I'm actually using in my other setup, is pretty much the same system right there. You know, very simple. You know, you can actually go auto, you can actually tweak every single channel. You know, you can go manual. I mean, it's really, really good, guys. So it's awesome. Now, another thing that I like about this camera is that in this camera, buttons behave in two ways, or even three ways sometimes. So you have a rapid tap that would actually prompt a style of menu, and then a deep press of a button prompts, you know, the deeper menu, and that is actually really good. You know, it's just kind of like extending the functionality of the buttons. You know, awesome. What else can we talk about this camera, guys? Let's actually read some of your comments. All right, so the Macronical said the careless browse can kill any computer it seems, bar the M1 Max, but damn, it's not a joke. I mean, I have an iMac Pro right here, and I've been stabilizing short clips, you know, a few seconds, but it doesn't even flinch, you know, a little bit. It's just so fast. William Portela said, oh, that was a reply to someone else. Okay, so Michael Maestro Pierce say, William Portela, it's like having all the best looks you want in one camera. Man, I love it. Saludos desde Mexico. Saludos. Claire Mahardy, curious about the motion interpolation of the FX6 compared to your C70. Best motion handling in the industry, in my opinion, is the Alexa. Can you compare? Claire, To be honest with you, I have not analyzed the footage, you know, side by side yet. You know, I've just been using the camera. But what I can tell you is that the motion on both camera is very, very smooth, very cinematic. That's all I can tell you right now. So I would have to put more hours and, you know, compare both and tell you if there is, you know, a difference, but not in this case. So William Portello said, I want to see this FX6 in action in all your next video. It will be fantastic. Yeah, I'm actually planning to do with a friend of mine here in Miami. He's also a videographer, and we said that we're going to do probably a Canon C70 versus FX6, and probably we're going to shoot a project together. We're going to tape it. We're going to do a video and talk about it. So that could be a good one to actually see the camera in action, shoot in the beach, shoot in the day, shoot in the night. It's probably going to be a hardcore day of shooting. I want to see this fixing. Okay, I said that. You don't have to bake the LUTs. You can use the LUT as a look. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's right. Obviously, any lookup table that you put in the camera, you can use it to preview it, and then you can actually dump that lookup table, you know, in post, which is going to be the best way. But the camera gives you the option to bake it, so that's why I mentioned that. Now, S-Cinetone, people talk about S-Cinetone. To be honest with you, I don't. It's not my cup of tea. It's not the type of grading that I like to have in my footage, or most of the time. But yes, I can see how it can be handy for some people to, you know, just use that S-Cinetone picture profile and just be done with it, you know, and deliver the footage to your client or whatever the case may be. Samum MX. Then, bro, you talk too much. Yeah, man, I've been trying to talk too much to try to express things. I like to be detailed, so yep. Dr. Sure Singh, I love Canon. Sony sucks. All right. Tell that to James Cameron from Avatar. Ah, that's right. Okay, clear. I see a lot of videos about the Catalyst Browse software. After stabilizing the footage, can you output back to the original camera format, or does it require ProRes export? Yes, you can actually export exactly how you shot it. So that means that if your footage is Xlr 3, you can still output it as Xlr 3, no change, no modification. And that's the way I've been doing it right now. So that's that, guys. Any other questions before we close this live? We've been live for an hour, so I will love at one point to give away one of this camera, but that would be a lot of money. That would be so cool. Maybe to do like a year giveaway, and with the little pennies that I made for my channel, just buy a camera for one of you guys and give it away. That would be epic. Should I do that? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, that would be actually really good. I just like to give back. You know, I like to give back to the community. I love this industry, and I love talking about videos. So I love for you guys to also, you know, watch these videos, and that means a lot to me. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So, hey, great live, Gaston. Keep up the great work. Guys, I'm planning to do a much more in-depth review. You know, I got this camera a week ago. I don't qualify to tell you that I know everything about this camera, but if you're a newbie like me, then you probably may relate with what I just said, because those may be questions that you may have surrounding your head. Should I consider this type of cameras? And I tell you, hey, listen, if your credit card has bandwidth like mine, although mine is already capped, go for it. Make sure that you can pay for it and that you have work, because $6,000 is not a cheap price to pay for a camera just to be thrown in there and never use it again. So you won't regret it. If you're looking for ease of use, probably this is not the camera for you. But if you're looking to elevate your mirrorless shooting experience, especially if you're coming from an A7 III or even a Sony a7S III, you're feeling that the Sony a7S III, you know, does a lot, has the same great quality, but you just want all those extra bells and whistles, this is the camera. And for those who are with Canon, guys, don't think it twice. Go with the Canon C70. It's such a great camera. It's a lot easier to use. It's more like shooting like with a Canon EOS R5, in my opinion. It has a nice screen, pretty big. You know, it takes the big batteries. All the ports are in the camera. The top handle is trash. It's just a piece of plastic, so I never use it. You know, I just use the camera like this. And Canon has really nice stabilized lenses. So options. So guys, let me know what you think. Drop your comments down below if you are actually watching the pre-recorded version of this live. Hope you had enjoyed it. Thank you for being with me tonight. And oh, there's another question. What about why you personally question about why you personally would choose one over the other for a project? Claire, the reason why I would choose one is versus the other is the type of shooter you are. Do you know, there are people that just want to get the job done and leave. And there are people that enjoy the entire process of shooting a video, just like people prefer automatic cars or self-driving cars and people like stick shift. So it's kind of like the same thing, you know. I would actually use the Canon C70 if I want kind of like a much more simplistic way of shooting, capture great image quality. You know, and you have to bear in mind that it's a Super 35, so you're gonna crop. All your full frame glass is gonna crop. That's something you're gonna have to keep in mind. But if you want that much more simplistic mirrorless, you know, workflow, the Canon C70 is the one. If you want more of a cinema, you know, performance, you know, shooting type, then the Sony FX9. And to be honest with you, you know, there are a lot of reasons why you may choose one over the other. You know, if you're going to be shooting with a crew of videographers, you know, most likely they are going to be more in the cinema, you know, in the cinema world. So, you know, mixing your cinema footage with theirs may make a little bit more sense. Some people say to impress customers. I never bought a camera to impress nobody. I just buy a camera to get the job done. But if you're one of those that like to impress, and that's that. Guys, so I hope you had enjoyed it. Let me know how you like this video. And I promise that there is going to be a version completely edited, clean cut, less rumble, straight to the point. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.